Have you ever caught yourself thinking, oh, I'm just not a creative person? Well, what if that's the wrong way to look at it? What if creativity isn't just one single thing? The ancient Greeks definitely didn't think so. They saw creativity as having many different faces, each with its own kind of divine spark. So let's dive into how modern science is actually rediscovering that same ancient wisdom.
Way back, the poet Robert Graves had this thought. Are the classic nine muses really the whole story? It's a fantastic question, right? And it's pretty much the same one that psychologists have been trying to answer ever since, trying to scientifically pin down and categorize the fundamental types of human creativity.
See, for the ancient Greeks, creativity wasn't some general one-size-fits-all skill. Nope, it was super specific to your domain. The inspiration you got depended entirely on which of the nine goddesses, the muses, you were trying to connect with.
And these muses, they covered a ton of ground. It wasn't just about painting or writing poems. They had muses for history, for tragic drama, for dance, and even for astronomy. It's just this brilliant reminder that right from the very beginning, people saw creativity as this incredible force that connects both the arts and the sciences.
Okay, so that brings us to the big question for today. If we were going to name the muses for our modern world, what would they even be? And that very question has kicked off a huge puzzle in psychological research. And at the heart of this puzzle is a really basic disagreement about what creativity even is. Is it one big thing, or is it a bunch of different things?
So in one corner, you've got this idea of a single general creativity, kind of like having a certain amount of creative horsepower you can just apply to whatever you want. But in the other corner, you have the domain-specific view. This one argues that being a brilliant musician doesn't automatically mean you're going to be a brilliant scientist. The skills just don't necessarily carry over.
So, to try and solve this puzzle, researchers decided to try something new. Instead of putting people through abstract tests in a lab, they decided to look at how creativity actually shows up in the real world. They basically said, hey, let's just ask people. The plan was to analyze how people see their own creative chops. The whole idea was to ask about real, concrete, everyday creative stuff and then just see what patterns shake out from how people rate themselves. And they went big. We're talking a massive scale here. They surveyed over 2,000 college students to make sure the data they got was seriously solid.
The process itself was actually pretty clever. First, they came up with a list of 94 different creative behaviors, everything from writing a poem to debugging a computer program. Then they had all 2,318 people rate how creative they felt they were at each of those things. And finally, they fed all that data into a statistical analysis. You can kind of think of it like a sorting hat for data. It just crunches all the numbers and figures out which of these behaviors naturally cluster together, revealing the hidden structures of creativity.
And the results were just fascinating. The data didn't point to one single type of creativity, and it didn't point to 9 either. Instead, 5 clear, statistically backed domains emerged. You could call them the 5 muses of the 21st century. Okay, so first up is what's called self or everyday creativity. This is the stuff we use all the time, right? It's solving a tricky personal problem, figuring out how to make yourself happy, being the one who can mediate an argument between friends. It's really the art of living. Next, you have scholarly creativity. This is all about intellectual horsepower, coming up with a totally new angle on an old debate, pulling together research from completely different fields to form a new idea, or just building a really killer argument. This is the creativity of the mind.
Third on the list is performance creativity. This one is all about public expression. It's the whole shebang, composing a song, writing a poem, acting in a play, or giving a speech that has everyone on the edge of their seat. It's creativity that really takes the stage.
The fourth domain is mechanical or scientific creativity. This is for the tinkerers, the builders, the systems thinkers. We're talking about building a robot from scratch, writing a clever piece of code, taking apart an engine just to see how it works, or designing a brilliant experiment. This is the creativity of figuring out how stuff works. And finally, we get to artistic creativity. Now, this is what most of us probably think of when we first hear the word creative, right? It's the ability to make tangible, visual works of art, sketching, painting, snapping that perfectly composed photograph, or creating a sculpture. So here's where it gets really interesting. We all have our own unique profile across these 5 areas. But it turns out that creative profile isn't just random. It's actually tied directly to the very core of who you are, your personality.
Yeah, these 5 creative dimensions, they line up remarkably well with what psychologists call the Big Five, which is the most widely accepted model of personality we have today. And this is a huge deal because it means your personality can actually give you some real clues about where your creative strengths might just be hiding.
And when you look at the patterns in the data, some really cool connections pop out. So for example, take the personality trait openness to experience. That's basically how curious you are, how much you love new ideas. Well, it's strongly linked to 4 of the 5 creative domains, all except for mechanical scientific creativity. And it probably won't shock you to hear that being an extrovert is tightly connected to performance creativity. It's just so clear that who you are shapes how you create.
So what's the big takeaway from all of this? I think the single most important idea is this. Creativity is so much bigger than just being good at art.
It's a fundamental part of what makes us human. It's how we solve problems at our jobs, it's how we navigate our friendships and relationships, it's how we make sense of the world, and it's how we build a life that feels meaningful. It is literally everywhere.
So the real question isn't if you're creative, it's how you're creative. We all have these muses inside of us. The real adventure is just discovering which ones speak your language and then learning how to listen to them.